Welcome back, you night owls. Tonight we embark on a journey not of conquest or political intrigue, but into the quiet, often overlooked world of Tudor rest. Imagine the pre-dawn darkness, the chill seeping through the wattle and daub walls, and the muffled snores of a world without electricity, without the hum of refrigerators or the glow of a distant street lamp. This is a world where sleep is not an afterthought, a hurried necessity, but a central, rhythm-defining part of life. We're going to dive deep into a day, a week, a life defined by the pursuit of deep restorative slumber. It's a world that will exhaust you just by listening, and you'll find yourself empathizing with their heavy-lidded fatigue. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sun has not yet crested the horizon, but already a faint grey light begins to filter through the oiled parchment windows of the manor house. It's a reluctant awakening, a slow creep of morning that has nothing to do with jarring alarms or the blare of a radio. The first sounds are not human, but animal. The distant lowing of cattle, the crowing of a cockerel that seems to be in a constant state of apathetic protest. Inside, the master of the house, a man named Thomas, stirs in his deep feather-stuffed bed. His body is a solid, aching testament to the previous day's labour, a symphony of minor complaints from his joints and muscles. He doesn't wake suddenly, but with a gradual heavy-lidded realisation that the cool air on his face means the night is over. He lies there for a few more minutes, savouring the warmth of the thick woolen blankets and the slow drift from dream to reality. This is his one moment of pure, unadulterated laziness, a small rebellion against the day that is already starting to pull him forward. Below stairs, the servants are already moving. A scullery maid, no older than 12, is up and about, her movements a practised silent shuffle. Her small thin body is not a canvas of exhaustion, but a tool, a vessel for the endless chores that begin before anyone else's day. She's already lugging heavy buckets of water from the well, the cold seeping through the wood and chilling her hands. The water is a life source for the entire household, and her body is the engine that delivers it. She's learned to move with a kind of weary grace, a silent economy of motion that conserves every ounce of energy for the long day ahead. Her sleep, we'll see, is a different kind of animal altogether, not the slow, luxurious descent of the master, but a sudden, total collapse. As Thomas finally pushes himself up, his feet touching the cold rush matting on the floor, the rituals of the morning begin. There's no hot coffee or quick shower to jolt him into wakefulness. Instead, he simply dons a thick woolen gown over his nightshirt, a simple act of protection against the cold. His wife, Eleanor, is already at a small coffer, pulling out fresh linen shirts for him. The air in the chamber is still and stale, a consequence of sealed windows and the previous night's exhaled breath. A servant arrives to light the fire in the hearth, and a thin wisp of smoke curls up, a fragile promise of warmth. The smoke fills the air, a scent that is both comforting and a little bit acrid. It's a smell that signifies the beginning of a day, a natural, earthy perfume that clings to their clothes and hair. The family gathers for a small, simple breakfast. It's a sparse meal, not the leisurely, conversation-filled affair we might imagine. The food is often just stale bread and ale. Yes, ale, even for the children. This is a mainstream historical fact that often surprises modern listeners. Water was a risky proposition, often tainted with all sorts of unpleasantries, so the weak, fermented ale was a safer, more reliable source of hydration. It's not the strong stuff that would make you stumble, but a low-alcohol brew that served a practical purpose. This morning ale, however, doesn't exactly get the metabolism revving. It just adds to the general sense of sluggishness, a soft, sleepy blanket over their already tired minds. The men of the house, including Thomas's 2 sons, prepare to head out. They pull on heavy woolen tunics and thick leather boots. The clothing is not designed for comfort, but for durability and protection from the elements. There is a weight to their garments that matches the weight of the day ahead. The women, meanwhile, begin their own set of daily rituals. Eleanor supervises the maids, ensuring the household is properly running. The scullery maid is still lugging water, and another servant is tasked with sweeping the floors with a broom made of bundled twigs, a task that raises clouds of dust and fills the air with a gritty, earthy scent. The entire morning is a slow, methodical process, a series of repetitive movements designed to get the household ready for the day. There is no frantic energy, no rush to beat the traffic, just a gentle, almost apathetic trudge into the daylight. The physical exertion of the morning rituals is a kind of warm-up for the real labour to come. A quirky tidbit about this is the use of a towel and water stand, which was a very rudimentary form of hygiene. It's not the hot steamy bath we might imagine, but a simple wash of the face and hands with cold water from a basin. The towel is often a shared piece of linen, and the water is refreshed, but not exactly replaced, with any great frequency. The entire process is about as invigorating as splashing yourself with cold water on a winter morning. Not very. It does, however, serve to clear the last vestiges of sleep from their eyes. Historians still argue whether the lack of a strong, bracing wake-up routine contributed to a more gradual, less stressful morning, or if it simply meant they started the day already feeling a little bit behind. There is a sense that the Tudors had a different relationship with their bodies, a kind of resigned acceptance of physical discomfort. They didn't fight against the aches and pains of waking. They just moved with them, a dance of sorts with their own fatigue. As the sun finally breaks free of the horizon, casting long, golden shadows across the fields, the household is fully awake, if not fully alert. The men head out to the fields, their tools heavy and their steps slow. They carry with them the promise of hard work, a physical strain that will only intensify as the day goes on. The women are occupied with their own set of endless tasks, from spinning wool to tending the garden. The children, too, are put to work, learning their chores from a young age. Their day is a long, slow grind, a continuous expenditure of energy with little in the way of a true break. This is the foundation of their sleep. It is not an escape from their day, but a direct consequence of it. They don't need a meditation app or a white noise machine to fall asleep. Their bodies are primed for it. The exhaustion is the key, the natural sedative that will pull them into a deep, dreamless state. And so, the day begins, a long, weary march toward the promise of another night's slumber. The sun, now fully risen, becomes the unforgiving master of the day. Its light, a harsh and unblinking eye, illuminates every flaw in the landscape and every bead of sweat on Thomas's brow. He's in the fields, his back bent to the earth, his hands calloused and thick around the wooden handle of his hoe. The rhythmic thwack of the tool against the soil is a monotonous and hypnotic sound, a steady drumbeat that seems to dictate the pace of his own heart. There are no machines here to assist him, no powered implements to soften the blow. It is just man and dirt, a primal struggle that has been played out for millennia. The ground is hard, unyielding, and each strike of the hoe sends a minor shockwave up his arms, a constant low-level tremor of physical protest. His sons, just boys really, are beside him. One is tasked with pulling stubborn weeds, his small fingers stained with earth. The other is learning to turn the soil, his movements less practiced and more clumsy than his father's. They complain, of course, not in a whiny, petulant way, but with the quiet, resigned sighs of a body that is already tired and knows it will only get more so. Thomas doesn't scold them. He just nods, a silent acknowledgement of their shared misery. He remembers feeling the exact same way as a boy, a sensation that has never truly left him. The ache is a constant companion, a presence as reliable as the sun itself. This is the foundation of their sleep, a deep, profound exhaustion that transcends mere tiredness. It's a state of being where the body screams for rest, a need as fundamental as breathing. In the manor house, the women's work is no less demanding. Eleanor, the mistress, is not a lady of leisure. She's on her feet from morning till night, her hands busy with 100 different tasks. She supervises the spinning of wool, the preparation of meals, and the cleaning of the house. The work is a continuous, repetitive cycle of motion. She moves from the spinning wheel, its rhythmic whir a counterpoint to the men's work, to the kitchen, where the heavy pots and pans demand a different kind of strength. The kitchen fire is a source of both warmth and a grueling, oppressive heat, and she sweats as she works, her linen coif a damp, clinging weight on her head. The work isn't physically violent, but it is relentless. There is no such thing as a day off, no weekend to recuperate. The household is a living thing, and it must be fed, cleaned, and clothed every single day. One mainstream historical fact that often gets glossed over is the sheer physical toll of textile production. Spinning, weaving and sewing were not just hobbies, they were a core economic function of the household. A woman could spend an entire day spinning enough yarn to make just a small piece of cloth. The repetitive motion, the constant focus, the strain on the eyes, all of it added up to a bone-deep weariness that a modern person can barely comprehend. The mistress and her maids would often sit together, their hands moving in a hypnotic blur, their conversation a low murmur that filled the air. This shared labour was not just about getting the work done, it was a communal experience of physical exertion, a kind of unspoken bond forged in the crucible of fatigue. The day wears on. The sun climbs to its apex and begins its slow descent. The air is thick with the scent of turned earth, wood smoke, and the faint coppery smell of sweat. A quirky tidbit. The Tudors had a very different relationship with bodily odours. The lack of regular bathing and the continuous physical labour meant that strong scents were a fact of life. They didn't recoil from them in the same way we might. They were simply a part of the human condition. They often used herbs and pomanders to mask the worst of the smells, but the underlying reality was always there. It's a sensory detail that's easy to forget, but crucial to understanding their daily lives and, by extension, their sleep. Imagine lying down to sleep after a long, hard day, surrounded by the powerful earthy smells of your own body and the bodies of those around you. It was not a sterile, neutral environment, but a deeply sensory one. The children, too, are not spared. As we remember from the morning, they are already working, their small frames carrying heavy burdens. They are not playing in the fields, they are toiling in them. Their childhood is not a time of carefree innocence, but a period of apprenticeship and exhaustion. Their sleep is often a form of escape, a brief reprieve from the demands placed upon them. They are so tired by the end of the day that they simply collapse, their dreams a jumble of the day's events. Historians still argue whether this early exposure to hard labour created a more resilient population or simply shortened their lifespans. It's a difficult question to answer, as the evidence points both ways. They were certainly tough, but the wear and tear on their bodies started so early that many of them would have been old and infirm by the time they reached what we would consider middle age. The afternoon brings a brief, but not entirely restful period of reprieve. A midday meal, often a simple affair of bread and cheese, is eaten quickly, sometimes right in the fields. There is no leisurely lunch break, no time for conversation or relaxation. The moment the food is consumed, the work resumes. The body's energy, replenished slightly, is immediately put back to use. This is a cruel rhythm, a cycle of depletion and minimal replenishment that keeps them in a constant state of fatigue. Their bodies are running on fumes, a kind of biological overdraft that will only be paid back with a long night's sleep. The lack of a true break means their minds are also constantly engaged with the tasks at hand, a kind of mental exhaustion that is just as potent as the physical kind. The sun begins its slow descent toward the horizon, and the light turns to a soft, bruised purple. The air grows cooler, and a faint dew begins to settle on the fields. Thomas and his sons finally head back toward the manor, their movements slow and heavy. Their bodies are crying out for rest. The physical pain is no longer a dull ache, but a sharp, persistent demand. They walk in silence, a shared understanding that words are unnecessary. They are moving toward the promise of a warm hearth, a simple meal, and the ultimate reward of a deep, profound sleep. This is not just the end of a day, it is the culmination of a day's effort, a final act in a long, weary performance. The sleep they will get will not be a luxury, it will be a necessity. It will be the hard-won prize for a day of hard, unyielding work. The path to their best sleep in history, as we are seeing, is paved with relentless, unforgiving labour. As the sun begins its slow, deliberate march from its zenith toward the western horizon, the day takes on a different kind of character. The morning's frantic energy, however slow-paced it might have been, gives way to a heavy, almost leaden quiet. This is the afternoon lull, a period that would seem ripe for a nap to our modern sensibilities, but for the Tudors it is a treacherous time. The body, having expended a great deal of its morning's energy, now battles with a profound sense of fatigue. For Thomas in the fields the work continues, but his movements are slower, more methodical. The sharp thwack of the hoe is replaced by a duller, more resigned sound. His mind, no longer focused with the morning's clarity, begins to wander. He thinks of the day's work left to be done, the ever-present gnaw of worry about the harvest, and the simple animal desire for rest. This afternoon period is a test of endurance, a mental as well as a physical battle. The mind, tired from the day's tasks, struggles to stay alert. A mainstream historical fact is that the Tudors did not have the benefit of our modern stimulants. There was no coffee, no tea, no energy drinks to provide a quick jolt. The primary beverages were water if it was safe, and ale, which, as we've established, was a low-alcohol brew and not exactly a pick-me-up. Without these aids, the natural rhythm of the body took over. The post-lunch slump, a phenomenon we all know, was a full-body experience for the Tudors. It was a time when mistakes could be made. A tired swing of the hoe could nick a root. A wandering mind could miscount a flock of sheep. A weary arm could drop a heavy pot in the kitchen. In the manor house, Eleanor feels this same drag. The morning's spinning is done, but now she's supervising the preparations for the evening meal. The kitchen is a sweltering, chaotic place, filled with the scents of simmering stews and baking bread. The maids, their movements now heavy and sluggish, are chopping vegetables and stirring pots. Eleanor's eyes, tired from the morning's work, scan the room, looking for signs of fatigue. A younger maid, her head bobbing slightly, is struggling to keep her focus on the bread she's kneading. Eleanor, with a weary sigh, simply places a hand on the girl's shoulder, a silent reminder to stay alert. This is not a time for scolding, but for understanding. They are all fighting the same battle against a universal enemy, the body's need for rest. This is also a time of heightened danger. A quirky tidbit is the concept of afternoon accidents. In a world without safety regulations, where tools were heavy and fires were open, a moment of lapsed concentration could have serious consequences. A tired mind might misjudge a step on a steep, uneven staircase, or a fatigued hand could slip while using a sharp knife. The body, running on fumes, is less coordinated, more prone to error. Historians still argue whether the afternoon was statistically more dangerous than the rest of the day, but anecdotal evidence from the period suggests a heightened awareness of the risks of fatigue. A tired mind was a liability, and a sleepy person in a world full of dangers was a person in peril. They learned to respect the afternoon lull, to push through it with a slow, deliberate focus, rather than to fight it with a burst of frantic energy. The children, too, feel the weight of the afternoon. After their morning's labour, they are often tasked with more tedious, repetitive chores. A young boy might be sent to fetch water again, the weight of the bucket now feeling twice as heavy. A girl might be given the task of mending torn clothes, her eyes straining in the dim afternoon light. Their exhaustion is a different kind of animal than their parents'. It is an absolute fatigue, a total physical collapse that can only be fought with sheer force of will. They often find themselves nodding off, their heads drooping over their work, only to be startled awake by a soft, gentle nudge from a parent or an older sibling. This is not a cruel awakening, but a protective one. A child asleep in a world of open fires and sharp tools is a child in danger. For Thomas, the afternoon brings its own form of meditative exhaustion. He's no longer fighting the ground, but working with it. His movements a slow, steady rhythm that conserves energy. His mind, however, is a different story. It drifts back to the dreams of the previous night, a jumble of images that seem to have no logical connection to his waking life. He remembers the feeling of floating, of a strange, surreal landscape that was both familiar and alien. This is not a sign of a troubled mind, but a common side effect of deep, restorative sleep. The dreams, we will see, were a very important part of their world, a kind of nightly broadcast from the subconscious that they took very seriously. For now, though, they are just a soft, hazy memory, a reminder of the night's rest that his body is so desperately craving again. As the day begins to wane, the light outside takes on a softer, more golden hue. The shadows lengthen and the air cools slightly. This is the signal that the long day is finally coming to an end. The work does not stop abruptly, but it tapers off. The final chores are completed with a kind of resigned slowness. The tools are put away, the animals are secured for the night, and the household begins its slow, deliberate transition from the world of labour to the world of rest. The men return from the fields, their bodies heavy with fatigue, their faces streaked with dirt and sweat. They are not in a rush. They trudge, a slow, methodical march toward the warm, comforting glow of the hearth. This is a moment of profound relief, a quiet exhale after a long, difficult day. The afternoon lull has been conquered, but not without a cost. The body and mind are completely, utterly spent, and the promise of a long night's sleep is no longer a wish, but a certainty. The sun dips below the horizon, and the world outside the manor house is bathed in a soft twilight glow. This is the liminal space between day and night, a period of winding down that is as deliberate and ritualized as the morning's awakening. The men, now back from the fields, shed their heavy, dirt-caked tunics and boots. They don a simpler, more comfortable set of clothes for the evening, a transition from the world of labour to the world of the home. The scent of wood smoke, which had been a faint presence all day, now becomes the dominant perfume of the house. A fire crackles in the hearth, its orange light dancing on the walls and casting long, dancing shadows that seem to swallow the corners of the room. The air, which had been thick with the smells of sweat and soil, now takes on the more comforting aromas of a cooking meal and the dry, smoky scent of the fire. For the Tudors, the evening was not a time of entertainment or social engagement in the way we understand it. There was no television, no radio, no screens to hypnotise them into a state of passive consumption. Instead, the evening was a period of quiet, purposeful preparation for the night's rest. The day's tasks, for the most part, were finished. The animals were fed, the tools were put away, and the doors were barred against the encroaching darkness. A mainstream historical fact is that this period was often a time for mending clothes, repairing simple tools, or sharing stories. The family would gather around the fire, their faces illuminated by the flickering light, their voices low and hushed. The conversation was not the boisterous, witty banter we might imagine, but a quiet recounting of the day's events, a simple sharing of burdens and small triumphs. Eleanor and the maids are still bustling in the kitchen, but the energy is different now. The frantic chaos of the afternoon has been replaced by a more relaxed, rhythmic pace. They are putting the final touches on the evening meal, a stew simmering in a large cauldron over the fire. The smell is thick and comforting, a promise of warmth and sustenance. The scullery maid, her small hands still raw from the day's work, is now helping to set the table. Her movements a slow, deliberate shuffle. She's a testament to the day's labour, her body a quiet symphony of fatigue. This is her moment of transition, a brief pause before the final push of cleaning up after the meal. Her small, thin frame seems to shrink a little in the firelight, her exhaustion a palpable presence in the room. A quirky tidbit about Tudor evenings is the practice of stitching by firelight. With no other source of light, and the need to mend and create textiles a constant, many people would spend their evenings sewing or embroidering by the dim, flickering light of the hearth. This was an incredibly straining activity for the eyes, and a practice that undoubtedly contributed to the high rates of poor eyesight among the population. The constant, repetitive motion of the needle, combined with the low light, was a perfect recipe for a deep, almost trance-like state of focus that would further tire the mind and body. The hum of conversation and the crackle of the fire would be the only sounds, a peaceful, almost meditative environment that stood in stark contrast to the gruelling labour of the day. The children, too, are settling down. Their evening is not filled with homework or structured play, but with simple, repetitive tasks. They might be tasked with helping to prepare the rushes for the floor, or with helping their mother sort through the day's harvest. Their young bodies, though resilient, are also completely spent. They are often seen yawning, their heads drooping, their eyes struggling to stay open. This is not a battle they are expected to win. Their parents, seeing their exhaustion, will often send them to bed early, a silent understanding that their bodies need the rest more than they need to learn to sew a straight line. Historians still argue whether this early bedtime was a form of discipline or a simple recognition of biological necessity. The truth, as is often the case, is probably a bit of both. A child who is tired is less likely to cause mischief, but a child who's allowed to sleep is a child who will grow up to be a strong, capable adult. As the family gathers around the table for the evening meal, the atmosphere is one of profound relief. The food, though simple, is hearty and warm, a final gift from the day's labour. They eat in a slow, deliberate manner, savouring the warmth of the stew and the solid feel of the bread in their hands. The conversation is minimal, a quiet communion of tired souls. The day's exhaustion is a palpable presence at the table, a silent guest that sits between them all. They're not trying to be quiet or polite. They are simply too tired for anything else. The energy of the day has been completely spent, and they are now running on the last dregs of their physical and mental reserves. This is a moment of profound, simple peace, a well-earned reward for a long, difficult day. The food is not just sustenance, it is a promise of rest, a final, comforting weight in their stomachs that will help them on their journey to sleep. After the meal, the household begins the final phase of its winding down. The fire is banked, its glow reduced to a warm, gentle pulse. The final chores are completed, and the last pots are put away. There is no lingering, no desire to stay up late. The body, having been pushed to its absolute limits, is now screaming for rest. The family begins its slow, deliberate march to the bedchambers. The journey is short, but it feels like a marathon. The stairs, which seem so simple in the morning, now feel steep and treacherous. The cold air of the upper floors is a sharp contrast to the warmth of the fire, and they move quickly toward their beds, drawn by the irresistible pull of slumber. The evening, a period of quiet, low-energy tasks, has done its job. It has calmed the mind, soothed the senses, and prepared the body for the long, deep sleep that is waiting for them. With the last of the embers glowing in the hearth, the final meal of the day is consumed. This is not the light, late-evening supper we might associate with a gentle wind-down. For the Tudors, this was often the most substantial meal of the day, a hearty and filling affair designed to provide the body with the fuel it needed to sustain a long, cold night. The stew we smelled earlier is now being eaten, thick with root vegetables, pulses, and perhaps a small piece of meat, if the family is fortunate. Thomas, his face still flushed from the fire's heat, eats with a quiet, methodical focus. His body, completely spent from the day's work, is a hungry furnace, and he shovels the food in with a kind of desperate efficiency. His sons, too, are eating in silence, their young bodies craving the energy to repair themselves. This is a mainstream historical fact that often surprises us. The Tudor diet was heavy, often starchy, and not what we would consider a recipe for a good night's sleep. Think of a modern person eating a large, rich meal right before bed. We know that's a recipe for indigestion and a restless night. But for the Tudors, it was a necessity. They needed the calories to stay warm and to provide their bodies with the raw materials for a night of repair. They didn't have heated homes, and the cold could be a constant, debilitating presence. A full stomach was a source of warmth and comfort, a kind of internal furnace that would keep them from shivering through the night. The heavy, difficult-to-digest food was a feature, not a bug, of their diet. The evening meal, or supper, was not a social event in the modern sense. It was a utilitarian affair, a final refueling before the body was shut down for the night. The conversations, if any, were low and brief. The energy for witty banter and lively discussion had been expended in the fields and the kitchen. The focus was on the food itself, on the simple, visceral pleasure of eating, and the profound relief of a full stomach. This is a far cry from our modern practice of eating light meals in the evening to promote better sleep. For the Tudors, a full stomach was a sign of security and a precursor to a deep, heavy slumber. A quirky tidbit that adds a layer to this is the influence of certain foods on dreams. Without the distractions of modern life, the Tudors were much more in tune with their internal world, and they paid close attention to the kind of dreams they had. A rich, heavy meal, particularly one with strong spices or certain vegetables, was thought to influence the quality of their dreams. They believed that what you ate could lead to either hot dreams, which were vivid and often disturbing, or cold dreams, which were more peaceful and less memorable. This was not just folklore. It was a kind of proto-scientific attempt to understand the connection between the body and the mind. They were, in their own way, engaging in a kind of biofeedback, using their diet to try and influence their nightly visions. The act of digestion itself would have been a significant part of their pre-sleep experience. The Tudors didn't have Tums or other modern digestive aids. The heavy, sometimes unsettling meals would sit in their stomachs like a solid weight, a constant low-level rumble that would be a part of their nightly landscape. For us, this sounds like a terrible night's sleep, but for them, it was just a part of the process. It was a sign that the body was working, that it was busy repairing itself and storing energy for the next day's labour. Historians still argue whether this constant state of digestion was a contributing factor to the deep, heavy sleep they experienced, or if it was simply something they had to endure in order to get the necessary calories. The lack of our modern sleep-disrupting factors, such as light pollution and constant noise, likely meant that they were able to sleep through the discomfort in a way we couldn't. After the meal, the last of the day's rituals are performed. A final drink of ale is consumed, and the fire is banked for the night. The family begins its slow, deliberate climb to the bedchambers. The stairs are creaky and uneven, and they move with a practiced caution, their bodies heavy with food and fatigue. The silence of the house is now complete, a kind of auditory blanket that swallows up all sound. There are no television sets humming, no distant traffic, no electric lights buzzing. There is just the sound of their own footsteps, the low rumble of their stomachs, and the gentle sighs of tired bodies. Thomas and Eleanor enter their chamber, a small enclosed space that is both their sanctuary and their world. It is cold, a stark contrast to the warmth of the fire below. The air is still and a little bit stale, and they move with a sense of purpose. They don't linger. They are not here to socialise or to read a book. They are here to sleep, and their bodies know it. They shed their outer garments, but not their nightshirts, and they move toward the massive, imposing bed that dominates the room. The bed itself is a kind of fortress, a physical manifestation of their desire for a safe, secure place to rest. The heavy meal has done its job. It has provided the body with a profound sense of satiety and a kind of inner warmth that will help them fight off the cold of the night. The journey from the dinner table to the bedchamber is a short one, but it is a journey from the world of the living to the world of dreams, a transition that is as profound as it is physical. The journey to the bedchamber is not a simple walk. It is a pilgrimage. As Thomas and Eleanor ascend the creaking stairs, leaving the warm glow of the banked fire behind, they enter a world of profound cold and stillness. The air in the upper floors is a crisp, damp shock, a stark contrast to the thick warmth of the hearth. Their chamber, the sanctum of their nightly rest, is a dark enclosed space. There are no paintings on the walls, no rugs on the floor to absorb the sound. The room is dominated by a single massive object, the bed. This is not just a piece of furniture, it is a fortress, a symbol of safety and comfort in a world that is often neither. This preparation of the chamber is a ritual in itself. Before they even enter, a servant would have been sent up with a warming pan, a long-handled copper vessel filled with hot coals from the kitchen fire. This is a mainstream historical fact that speaks volumes about the battle against the cold. The servant would glide the pan between the sheets, a silent, rhythmic motion that chases away the chill and imparts a luxurious, short-lived warmth. The scent of a little bit of scorched linen, a faint, toasted smell would fill the air, a sign that the bed was ready. The warming pan was not a luxury for the rich. It was a necessity for anyone who could afford one. A simple piece of technology that made the difference between a restless, shivering night and a warm, inviting one. The room itself is sparse, but every item has a purpose. There is a small coffer at the foot of the bed, a repository for their most precious belongings, and a place to sit while they undress. There might be a single wooden stool, and a small table with a basin and ewer for the morning's quick wash. The windows, often just a single small opening covered with oiled parchment or a horn pane, are sealed tight against the night air. The Tudors had a profound fear of night air, believing it to be a source of disease and ill health. This belief, while unscientific, meant that their bedchambers were often stuffy, enclosed spaces, a kind of self-imposed quarantine against the supposed evils of the darkness. The lack of ventilation, while potentially unhealthy, created a kind of thick, quiet atmosphere that would have been conducive to a deep, undisturbed sleep. A quirky tidbit about Tudor bedchambers is the practice of having a chamber pot under the bed. This was not a sign of slovenliness, but a practical necessity. The idea of venturing down a set of dark, uneven stairs in the middle of the night, in a house with no electric lights, was a terrifying one. The chamber pot was a simple, elegant solution to this problem, a way to handle the nightly business without having to brave the dangers of the night. It was a simple, unglamorous part of their nightly routine, a quiet reminder of the differences between their world and ours. This simple object, often made of earthenware or pewter, was a silent witness to their nightly awakenings and their slow descents back into sleep. As Thomas and Eleanor shed their outer garments, they don a simple linen nightshirt. This is not the elaborate nightwear we might see in paintings, but a plain, functional garment. The purpose of the nightshirt was twofold. It was a layer of warmth against the cold, and it was a simple, hygienic barrier between their bodies and the bed's expensive linens. There was no concept of a pyjama party or a social element to their nightwear. It was a simple, utilitarian piece of clothing designed for a single purpose: to sleep. As they get into the massive bed, they are not alone. Their children, if they are young, would often sleep in the same bed, or in a trundle bed pulled out from underneath. The concept of a private individual bedchamber was a luxury that was still a long way off for most people. The warmth of multiple bodies was another natural defence against the cold, and the shared space was a source of comfort and security. The bed itself is a kind of self-contained world. The massive posts and heavy curtains, often made of thick wool or velvet, were not just for show. They were a practical solution to the problem of a cold, drafty room. The curtains could be drawn completely closed, creating a small, warm microclimate inside the bed, a safe harbour against the freezing night air. This is a crucial element of their sleep hygiene. They weren't just getting into bed. They were climbing into a kind of personal tent, a cocoon of warmth and stillness that was perfectly designed to promote a deep, restful slumber. Historians still argue whether this enclosed space was a source of comfort or a kind of claustrophobic prison. The evidence, again, points both ways. For a tired, cold person, the warmth and security of the closed curtains would have been a profound relief. But for someone with a troubled mind, it might have felt like a trap, a dark, enclosed space with no escape. As Thomas and Eleanor settle into the bed, the final preparations are made. A small candle, if they can afford one, might be lit for a few minutes, its flickering light a gentle counterpoint to the darkness. They don't linger. They are not here to read or to talk. Their bodies, exhausted from the day's labour, are screaming for rest. They lie on their backs, a posture that was thought to be the most healthful for sleeping. They pull the thick woolen blankets up to their chins, a final comforting weight. The chamber, once a cold and empty space, is now a sanctuary of warmth and stillness. The preparations are complete. The stage is set. And with a final, collective sigh, the house falls silent, and the long, slow descent into sleep begins. With the bed curtains drawn and the chamber pot tucked away, the Tudors embark on the most profound part of their nightly journey, the physical act of lying down. This is not a casual collapse, but a deliberate surrender to the body's demands. Thomas and Eleanor settle into their bed, a magnificent, imposing structure that is the very heart of their chamber. The bed itself is a complex piece of engineering, built for function as much as for show. It's a testament to the importance of sleep in their lives. The frame is often made of sturdy oak, its carved posts reaching toward the low ceiling like silent sentinels. The most important part, however, is what lies within. This is where we get into a mainstream historical fact that might make you a little squirmy. The mattress, or straw sack, was often a large linen or canvas bag filled with straw or chaff. This was the foundation of their comfort, a firm, springy surface that would conform, to a certain degree, to the shape of their bodies. The straw, of course, was not a permanent solution. It would become lumpy and compacted over time, and it was a haven for all sorts of tiny unwanted guests. A quirky tidbit about this is that the straw would often be changed only once a year, a kind of annual spring cleaning that must have been both a massive undertaking and a great relief. The smell of fresh straw, we can imagine, was a kind of earthy luxury, a fleeting promise of a more hygienic night's sleep. On top of the straw sack would be a layer of wool, and then a thick feather bed, a large bag filled with goose or duck feathers. This was the true mark of luxury, a soft, yielding surface that provided warmth and a profound sense of comfort. The feather bed was a treasured possession, often passed down from generation to generation. It was a tangible symbol of a family's wealth and a physical representation of their desire for a deep restorative rest. The combination of the firm straw sack and the soft feather bed created a surface that was both supportive and yielding, a perfect combination for a tired, aching body. The blankets, or coverlets, were also crucial to the sleep experience. They were not light, decorative throws, but heavy, thick woolen coverings that provided the necessary insulation against the cold. The weight of the wool would have been a comforting presence, a kind of physical pressure that would have helped to calm the body and mind. The entire bed, with its straw sack, feather bed and heavy blankets, was a layered system of warmth and support, a kind of personal heating unit in a cold, unforgiving world. Historians still argue whether the lack of a modern sprung mattress was a good thing or a bad thing. Some argue that the firm, supportive nature of the straw sack was actually better for their spines, while others argue that the constant lumps and bumps must have been a source of discomfort. The truth, as is often the case, probably lies somewhere in the middle. Their bodies were simply accustomed to a different kind of support, a different kind of comfort. Thomas and Eleanor lie down, their bodies already in the process of shutting down. The day's exhaustion is a palpable presence in the bed, a heavy weight that settles over them. The air trapped inside the bed curtains is now warm and thick with their breath. The only sounds are the gentle rustle of the straw and the soft rhythmic sound of their breathing. The physical sensation of being in the bed is a complex one. There is the firm support of the straw, the soft cradle of the feathers, the heavy weight of the blankets. It is a total sensory experience, a kind of physical cocoon that separates them from the cold and darkness of the outside world. The Tudors also had a different relationship with hygiene, a fact that is often difficult for us to comprehend. The lack of regular bathing meant that the bed was a shared space not just for humans, but for all sorts of microscopic life. The straw sacks and feather beds, while comfortable, were not exactly sterile. This is a quiet, unspoken part of their sleep experience, a sensory reality that we can only guess at. They were simply used to it, in the same way we're used to the quiet hum of our modern homes. It was a part of their world, a natural consequence of their lifestyle. As they drift off, their minds, freed from the day's tasks, begin to wander. They don't have the luxury of reading a book or listening to music to help them fall asleep. Their sleep is a direct, unmediated consequence of their exhaustion. They just lie there, in the dark, and let their bodies do what they are designed to do. The heavy meal in their stomach is a low, comforting rumble. The physical ache of their muscles is a kind of lullaby. The weight of the blankets is a final, reassuring embrace. The bed, with its firm straw and soft feathers, is a cradle for their tired souls. The journey to sleep is a short one, a simple descent from wakefulness to unconsciousness. There is no tossing and turning, no struggle against insomnia. There is just the profound, total surrender of a body that has earned its rest. The first phase of their sleep has begun, a deep, dreamless slumber that will last for several hours. This is the first sleep, and it is the foundation of their entire nightly experience. The manor house is now utterly silent. The sounds of the day, the distant lowing of cattle, the rustle of straw, the low hum of conversation have been completely swallowed by the darkness. Inside the bedchamber, Thomas and Eleanor are deep in their first sleep. This is not a light doze or a fitful slumber. It is a profound, total unconsciousness, a state of being where the body is in full-scale repair mode. This first sleep, a mainstream historical fact, was the longest and most restorative period of their nightly rest. It was a time when the day's physical toll was paid back in full, when the muscles and joints screaming from the day's labour were finally given a chance to mend. The concept of first sleep and second sleep is a fascinating one, a sleep pattern that was common throughout history and is only now being rediscovered. For the Tudors, it was not a sign of a troubled night, it was the norm. They would go to bed at sundown, often as early as 9 p.m, and fall into a deep, uninterrupted slumber that would last for several hours. This was their body's way of dealing with the profound exhaustion of their daily lives. The deep, heavy sleep was a kind of biological reset button, a total shutdown of the conscious mind, and a total focus on physical restoration. Thomas, a man who spent his days with his back bent to the earth, would be in this state, his body a quiet, still vessel of rest. His breathing would be deep and rhythmic, a soft, reassuring sound in the otherwise silent chamber. A quirky tidbit about this is the complete lack of a bedtime story culture. There were no books to read before bed, no light entertainment to ease the mind into a state of rest. Their sleep was a direct, unmediated consequence of their exhaustion. They just lay down and fell asleep. The transition from wakefulness to unconsciousness would have been a quick, total descent, a kind of freefall into slumber. There was no struggle, no fight against insomnia. The body simply demanded it, and the mind surrendered. This is a profound difference from our modern sleep experience, where we often have to fight against a wired, overstimulated mind to find rest. For the Tudors, the mind was as tired as the body, a natural partner in the pursuit of slumber. As the hours of the night tick by, marked not by a clock but by the slow passage of the moon across the sky, the household is completely still. The servants too are in their own version of the first sleep, a more communal and less private affair, but just as profound. The scullery maid, her small body curled up on a straw pallet, would be in a deep, dreamless state, her hands no longer raw from the day's work, but soft and still in her sleep. The entire house is a kind of sleeping organism, a single entity of rest that is breathing in a slow, steady rhythm. The silence is not an absence of sound, but a presence in itself, a thick, heavy blanket that covers everything. Historians still argue whether this segmented sleep pattern was a biological necessity or a cultural norm. Some argue that the lack of artificial light meant their bodies were more in tune with the natural rhythm of the sun, and the awakening was a natural part of their circadian cycle. Others argue that it was a product of their living conditions, where the long, dark, cold nights made a long period of uninterrupted sleep impossible. The truth, as is often the case, is probably a combination of both. Their biology, unburdened by artificial light, was primed for this kind of sleep, but their environment also made a long, continuous night's sleep a difficult proposition. The cold, the hard beds, the occasional animal noises, all of these things would have made a full 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep a rarity. This first sleep is a kind of cleansing process. The mind, free from the day's worries, is given a chance to rest and reorganize itself. The body, unburdened by the demands of labour, is able to begin the process of healing and repair. The heavy meal from earlier is now a soft, comforting weight in their stomachs, providing the necessary energy for this nightly work. The temperature inside the bed curtains, while not warm by our standards, is a kind of personal microclimate, a safe harbour against the freezing night air. Thomas and Eleanor are completely separated from the outside world, from its cold, its dangers, and its worries. They are in a state of profound, total rest. But this rest, as we will see, is not a permanent one. The first sleep is just the beginning of their nightly journey. As the clock ticks toward the midnight hour, a new phase of their sleep will begin. The body, having had its fill of deep restorative rest, will begin its slow, deliberate awakening. The mind, having been silent for several hours, will begin to stir. The house, once completely silent, will begin to stir as well. The first sleep is a crucial part of their nightly rhythm, but it is not the whole story. It is the foundation upon which the rest of their sleep is built, a kind of prelude to the second act of their nocturnal lives. The silence of the manor house is now broken, not by a sudden noise, but by a slow, gradual stir. It is the dead of night, the hours between midnight and 2 a.m., but the house is not entirely asleep. Thomas, having had his fill of the deep, restorative first sleep, now begins to stir. His awakening is not a sudden jolt, but a slow, gentle rise to consciousness. His eyes flutter open in the profound darkness of the chamber, his mind no longer a blank slate, but a repository of the day's lingering thoughts. He does not reach for a phone or a book, he simply lies there, in the quiet, and thinks. This period of awakening, a mainstream historical fact known as the midnight hour, was a normal and expected part of the Tudor sleep cycle. It was a time of quiet reflection, a kind of interlude between the deep, restorative first sleep and the lighter, more dream-filled second sleep. Thomas would often use this time to think about the day's work, to plan for the next day, or to simply contemplate the world around him. This was a form of mental digestion, a chance for the mind to process the information of the day in a calm, quiet environment. Without the distractions of modern life, the Tudors were able to engage in this kind of deep, internal reflection in a way that we rarely can. This period of wakefulness was not confined to the bedchamber. For many, it was a time for action. A quirky tidbit about the midnight hour is that it was often used for domestic routines. People would get up, light a small candle, and attend to various chores. A farmer might go out to check on his animals, a woman might get up to tend to a sick child, or a person might simply use the time to visit the chamber pot. This was a normal, expected part of their nightly routine, a kind of communal awakening that was not a source of frustration, but a period of quiet, purposeful activity. Historians still argue whether this was a more healthful way to sleep, or if it was a symptom of a pre-industrial world that was more in tune with the natural rhythms of the sun and moon. The lack of artificial light meant that the hours of darkness were simply too long for a single 8-hour block of sleep. For Thomas and Eleanor, the midnight hour was often a time for quiet conversation. They might talk in low whispers, their voices a soft, intimate sound in the otherwise silent room. They would discuss their worries about the harvest, the needs of their children, or the simple joys of their lives. This was a time for connection, a period of intimacy that was free from the demands of the day. In the absence of a modern, bustling social life, the midnight hour was a precious opportunity for quiet, meaningful connection. They would also use this time for a kind of spiritual reflection, a quiet prayer or a moment of contemplation about the world beyond their small manor house. The entire house, though mostly silent, was still a living, breathing entity. The servants too would stir. A maid might get up to tend to the kitchen fire, adding a log to keep the embers alive for the morning. A stable hand might venture out to check on the horses, their movements a soft shuffling sound in the darkness. The entire house was in a state of quiet, low-energy activity, a kind of collective interlude between the first and second sleeps. This was not a world of deep, uninterrupted slumber, but a world of segmented, purposeful rest. After an hour or two of this quiet activity, the Tudors would begin their journey back to sleep. The body, having had its fill of deep rest, and the mind, having had its fill of quiet reflection, would now begin its slow descent into the second sleep. This was a different kind of sleep, a lighter, more dream-filled rest that was more about mental processing than physical repair. The body, having already been restored, would now turn its attention to the more subtle work of the mind. The dreams, which were a rarity during the deep first sleep, would now begin in earnest. The midnight hour was not a disruption. It was an integral part of their sleep pattern. It was a time for quiet reflection, for domestic routines, and for a kind of intimacy that was free from the demands of the day. It was a period of rest that was not about unconsciousness, but about a different kind of consciousness, a slow, gentle, and purposeful state of being. And so, with their midnight routines complete, and their minds a little more at ease, the Tudors would prepare for the final phase of their nightly journey, a phase that would lead them back to the world of dreams and a final restorative period of slumber. The quiet, purposeful interlude of the midnight hour comes to a gentle close. Thomas and Eleanor, having tended to their thoughts, and perhaps exchanged a few whispered words, now prepare to re-enter the world of slumber. This is the beginning of the second sleep, a phase of their nightly rest that is profoundly different from the deep, heavy first sleep. The body, having been largely restored, is now in a state of a more relaxed, gentle rest. The mind, having had its chance for quiet reflection, is now primed for a new kind of activity, the world of dreams. They settle back into the massive bed, the warmth of the heavy blankets and the soft cradle of the feather bed, a comforting, familiar presence. The silence of the chamber is now a little less absolute, a little more punctuated by the gentle creaks and sighs of an old house. This is a mainstream historical fact. The Tudors did not expect a single, uninterrupted night of sleep. The segmented sleep pattern was so normal that it was simply a part of their existence, and they did not try to fight it. The second sleep was not a sign of a bad night. It was the final, restorative phase of a good one. The nature of the second sleep is one of lightness and ease. It is a period of rest that is more about mental processing than physical repair. The dreams that were absent during the deep first sleep now begin to unfold. They are not the frantic, surreal visions we might associate with nightmares, but a gentler, more symbolic kind of imagery. Thomas might dream of the fields, but the images would be less about the grueling labour and more about the simple, elemental beauty of the earth. He might dream of the harvest, but the dream would be a hopeful, peaceful vision of bounty, a kind of mental projection of his deepest desires. A quirky tidbit about this is the belief that the second sleep was the time when good dreams would come. The first sleep was for the body, and the second sleep was for the soul. They believed that the dreams of the second sleep were a form of spiritual communication, a message from God, or a kind of prophecy about the future. They would often try to remember their dreams from the second sleep, and they would discuss them in the morning, trying to decipher their meaning. This was a form of communal dream interpretation, a shared ritual that gave a deeper meaning to their nightly rest. Historians still argue whether this belief in dream interpretation was a form of superstition or a kind of folk psychology that helped them to process their daily lives. The truth, as is often the case, is probably a bit of both. The belief gave them a sense of control over their internal world, a way to make sense of the strange, surreal visions that came to them in the night. The mind during the second sleep is a powerful tool for self-reflection. It is a time for the brain to file away the day's memories, to process emotions, and to make connections that were not apparent during the waking hours. For the Tudors, this was not a conscious process, but a silent, unseen work of the mind. They would simply lie there, in the dark, and let their minds do what they were designed to do. The exhaustion of the first sleep has been replaced by a kind of gentle, peaceful rest, a state of being where the mind is active but not agitated. The hours of the second sleep are shorter than the first, and they are marked by a lighter kind of rest. The body, no longer in a state of deep repair, is more receptive to external stimuli. A distant dog barking, a sudden gust of wind against the window. These sounds might not have woken them during the first sleep, but they are more likely to register during the second. The Tudors were not a people who slept in a silent, hermetically sealed environment. They slept in a world full of natural sounds, and their bodies were accustomed to it. The occasional noise was not a disruption, but a part of the rhythm of the night. As the pre-dawn hours begin to filter through the oiled parchment windows, the second sleep begins to come to a gentle close. The dreams become less vivid, and the mind begins its slow, deliberate transition back to wakefulness. The body, having had its fill of both deep and light rest, is now ready for the day ahead. The fatigue of the previous day has been completely paid back, and the Tudors wake up not with a jolt, but with a slow, gradual rise to consciousness. They are not fighting against their rest. They are emerging from it, refreshed and ready for the demands of a new day. The second sleep, a period of gentle dreams and mental processing, is the final, crucial part of their nightly journey. A beautiful and purposeful end to a long, hard-earned rest. The second sleep, a gentle sea of dreams and soft rest, is the final stage of the nightly journey. As Thomas and Eleanor drift within its currents, their minds, freed from the constraints of the waking world, begin to create their own realities. This is a time of profound internal activity, a silent, unseen process that the Tudors took very seriously. For them, dreams were not just random electrical impulses, they were a form of communication, a glimpse into the future, or a reflection of the soul. The dreamscapes of the Tudor era were a complex and meaningful part of their lives, and they paid close attention to the images and symbols that came to them in the night. This is a mainstream historical fact. The Tudors were deeply superstitious, and dream interpretation was a common practice. They believed that certain symbols had specific meanings. To dream of a snake might be a warning of betrayal, while to dream of a flowering rosebush might be a sign of good fortune to come. The dreams were a kind of nightly broadcast from the subconscious, and they were a valuable source of information. They didn't have therapists or self-help books. They had their dreams, and they used them to try and make sense of their lives. This was a form of folk psychology, a way to process their worries and their hopes in a world that was often unpredictable and frightening. A quirky tidbit about this is the belief that certain foods could influence the dreams. As we remember from supper, a heavy, rich meal was thought to lead to hot dreams, which were vivid and often disturbing. A lighter meal, on the other hand, was thought to lead to cold dreams, which were more peaceful and less memorable. This was not a scientific theory, but a kind of experiential wisdom, a belief that the physical state of the body had a direct influence on the state of the mind. They would often try to eat certain foods before bed to try and influence the kind of dreams they had, a kind of self-experimentation that was both fascinating and a little bit silly. Thomas, in his second sleep, might dream of the harvest. But this is not a dream of the grueling labour of the day. It is a symbolic dream. He might dream of golden stalks of wheat, standing tall and proud in a field of endless sunshine. This would not be just a simple wish, it would be a prophecy, a sign that the harvest would be bountiful, and that his family would be well fed. The dream would be a source of profound comfort and hope, a kind of nightly reassurance that their hard work would pay off. Eleanor, meanwhile, might dream of a child. This would not be just a simple desire. It would be a sign that her family would grow, that her legacy would continue. The dream would be a source of profound joy and a quiet promise of a future. Historians still argue whether this reliance on dream interpretation was a source of comfort or a source of anxiety. On the one hand, it gave them a sense of control over their lives, a way to make sense of the chaos and unpredictability of the world. On the other hand, a bad dream could be a source of profound worry, a sign of a looming disaster that they could do nothing to prevent. The fear of a hot dream, a nightmare of betrayal or loss, would have been a very real and very powerful emotion. The dreams were a double-edged sword, a source of both hope and fear. The dreams of the Tudors were also a reflection of their waking lives. The symbols and images were often drawn from the world around them, animals, plants, the weather, and the rhythms of the seasons. They didn't have the benefit of our modern, media-saturated world, and their dreams were not filled with pop culture references or fictional characters. Their dreamscapes were a more primal, more elemental world, a kind of reflection of their deep connection to the natural world. This is a profound difference from our modern dreams, which are often a jumble of news headlines, social media feeds, and movie plots. Their dreams were a purer, more direct form of communication from the subconscious, a more honest reflection of their inner world. As the second sleep begins to wane, the dreams become less vivid and more fragmented. The mind begins its slow, deliberate transition back to wakefulness, a kind of gentle re-entry into the world of the living. The dreams fade, not with a jolt, but with a slow, gradual release. The images become less distinct, the symbols less clear. The mind, having done its nightly work, is now ready for a new day. The dreams, whether they were prophecies of hope or warnings of fear, have served their purpose. They have given the Tudors a deeper understanding of themselves and their world, a kind of nightly education that was as important as their daily labour. The journey through the dreamscape is over, and the final gentle awakening is about to begin. As the dreams of the second sleep fade to a gentle memory, the first whispers of a new day begin to stir. It is the pre-dawn darkness, a profound silence that is slowly, deliberately beginning to give way to the sounds of a new morning. The sun has not yet risen, but the world is already beginning its slow, methodical awakening. This is a crucial moment, a period of transition that is as important as the first sleep. For the Tudors, waking up was not a jarring event. It was a slow, deliberate process, a kind of gentle re-entry into the world of the living. The alarm clock, a symbol of our modern, frantic mornings, was a technology that was centuries away. For the Tudors, the morning bell, a mainstream historical fact, was their signal. A bell ringer would often be tasked with ringing the bell at a set time, a sound that would travel through the quiet air and serve as a gentle, non-jarring signal to the household. The bell was not a loud, frantic clamour, but a slow, deliberate tolling that was designed to wake a person up gradually. This was a kind of auditory alarm clock that was in perfect harmony with the Tudors' slow, deliberate pace of life. The first sounds of the day were often not human, but animal. The distant lowing of cattle, the crowing of the cockerel, the soft rustle of a horse in its stall. These sounds were a kind of natural symphony, a quiet prelude to the human activity that would soon follow. The Tudors were deeply in tune with the natural world, and their bodies were accustomed to its rhythms. The morning was not a time to be rushed, but a time to be savoured. They would often lie in bed for a few more minutes, savouring the last moments of warmth and quiet before the demands of the day began to encroach. A quirky tidbit about this is the practice of morning prayers in bed. Without the distractions of modern life, the Tudors would often use the first few minutes of their waking hours for a quiet moment of spiritual reflection. This was not a formal, ritualised prayer, but a simple, heartfelt moment of gratitude for the new day. This was a way of centering themselves, of setting a positive tone for the day ahead. This was a form of mental preparation, a kind of internal warm-up for the physical labour that was about to begin. Historians still argue whether this was a genuine spiritual practice or a form of psychological self-soothing. The truth, as is often the case, is probably a bit of both. In a world full of dangers and uncertainties, a quiet moment of prayer would have been a source of profound comfort and a powerful way to start the day. The process of waking up was a full-body experience. The cold of the chamber, the first sensation to greet them, was a powerful, invigorating shock. It was a kind of natural jolt that would help to chase away the last vestiges of sleep. The act of getting out of bed, of pushing the heavy blankets aside and feeling the cold rush matting on their feet, was a kind of physical punctuation mark on the end of the night's rest. The body, having been completely restored, was now ready to move. There was no grogginess, no sluggishness, just a profound sense of readiness. The rest of the household, too, was in the process of waking up. The servants, having had their fill of a more communal and less luxurious rest, would be the first to rise. The scullery maid, her small body now completely refreshed, would be up and about, her movements a quiet, purposeful shuffle. She would be tasked with starting the kitchen fire, a simple act that was the first and most important ritual of the day. The smell of wood smoke, a scent that was a constant and comforting presence in their lives, would begin to fill the air, a final signal that the night was over and the day was beginning. The Tudors' slow, gentle awakening stands in stark contrast to our modern frantic mornings. We are often jolted awake by a loud alarm clock, and we immediately plunge into a world of emails, social media, and the pressures of our jobs. For the Tudors, the morning was a time for quiet reflection, for gentle movement, and for a slow, deliberate re-entry into the world. They did not fight against their bodies' natural rhythms. They worked with them. The morning was not a time to be conquered, but a time to be embraced. And so, with a final collective sigh, the Tudors would rise from their beds, their bodies and minds completely restored, and they would begin the long, weary march toward another day and another night of well-earned rest. The Tudor world, as we have seen, was a deeply physical one, but it was also a world saturated with the invisible. As they rise from their beds, their bodies restored and their minds slowly re-engaging with the waking world, they carry with them a tapestry of beliefs and superstitions that profoundly shaped their nightly rest. Sleep was not just a biological process, it was a mystical one, a journey into a realm where unseen forces held sway. The darkness, which for us is just the absence of light, was for them a space teeming with spirits, omens, and the potential for malevolent influence. A mainstream historical fact is the widespread belief in witchcraft and evil spirits. These were not the stuff of children's stories. They were a very real and present danger. People believed that witches could cast spells that would cause a person to have a restless, dream-filled night, or even to fall into a state of permanent slumber. They believed that spirits, both good and bad, roamed the earth at night, and that the darkness was their hunting ground. This belief had a profound influence on their sleep practices. They would often say a prayer before bed, not just for a restful night, but for protection against these unseen forces. The bed itself, with its heavy curtains and enclosed space, was a kind of physical fortress against the spiritual dangers of the night. A quirky tidbit about this is the practice of leaving a nightlight burning. This was not a small electric nightlight like we have today. It was a simple candle or a small lamp filled with oil. The light was not just a source of illumination, it was a symbol of hope and a ward against the darkness. The Tudors believed that evil spirits were repelled by light, and that a flickering flame in the darkness was a powerful form of protection. The light was also a practical necessity, as the journey to the chamber pot was a treacherous one. But its primary purpose was a spiritual one, a quiet, flickering reassurance that they were not alone in the dark. Historians still argue whether this belief in evil spirits was a form of mass delusion or a cultural response to the very real dangers of their time. The fear of disease, of animal attacks, and of other unforeseen dangers would have been very real, and the belief in evil spirits was a way of making sense of a world that was often inexplicable and terrifying. The Tudors also had a deep and abiding belief in the power of omens. A sudden sound in the night, a distant dog barking, or a strange dream could be interpreted as a sign of something to come. A dream of a tooth falling out might be interpreted as a sign of an impending death in the family, while a dream of a black cat might be a sign of bad luck. These beliefs, while unscientific, had a profound influence on their mental state. A person who had a bad omen in the night would wake up with a sense of dread, a feeling that they were under the watchful eye of a malevolent force. This fear, while irrational, would have been a very real and very powerful emotion, a kind of low-level anxiety that would have coloured their entire day. The sleep itself was not immune to this superstition. They believed that the position in which you slept could have an influence on your health and your dreams. To sleep on your back was thought to be the most healthful position, while to sleep on your stomach was thought to be a sign of a troubled mind. They also believed that the direction in which you slept could have an influence on your dreams. To sleep with your head pointing toward the east was thought to bring good dreams, while to sleep with your head pointing toward the west was thought to bring bad dreams. These beliefs, while unscientific, were a part of their nightly ritual, a kind of internal checklist that they would go through before they finally drifted off to sleep. The sleep they got was a total body experience. but it was also a total mind experience. Their beliefs, their fears, and their hopes were all a part of the tapestry of their nightly rest. The sleep they got was not just a biological necessity. It was a spiritual and psychological journey into a world that was both comforting and terrifying. The deep, restorative rest of the first sleep was a journey into a world of pure, unmediated rest, while the dream-filled second sleep was a journey into a world of symbols and omens. The Tudors' sleep was a reflection of their world, a world that was both physical and spiritual, and a world that was in constant communication with the invisible. In the quiet of the bedchamber, as the shadows lengthen and the house settles into a state of pre-slumber stillness, the Tudors turn not just to ritual and superstition, but to science, or at least their version of it. The body, having been pushed to its absolute limits, often needed a little bit of help to fully surrender to sleep. This is where the world of the Tudor apothecary comes into play, a world of herbs, concoctions, and folk remedies designed to soothe the body and calm the mind. The Tudors were not a people who went to bed with a frantic, overstimulated mind, but they were a people who went to bed with a body that was often in a state of low-level pain and discomfort. A mainstream historical fact is the widespread use of herbal remedies for a variety of ailments, including sleeplessness. A Tudor apothecary, often a woman with a deep knowledge of the natural world, would have a vast array of herbs at her disposal. Chamomile, a gentle and calming herb, was often brewed into a tea and consumed before bed. Its gentle floral scent and its mild sedative properties would have been a perfect antidote to a day of physical labour. Hops, the same plant used to brew their low-alcohol ale, were also used as a sleep aid. A sachet of dried hops would often be placed under the pillow, its earthy, slightly bitter scent a powerful sleep-inducing agent. The Tudors were, in their own way, engaging in a kind of aromatherapy, using the power of scent to influence their state of mind. A quirky tidbit about this is the use of sleepy syrups for children. These were often concoctions of herbs like poppies, which contain a mild sedative, and other calming plants. The syrups were not meant to be a form of abuse, but a genuine attempt to help a restless child find sleep. The Tudors believed that a child who was not sleeping was a child who was at risk, and the sleepy syrup was a kind of medicine, a powerful tool to help a child's body and mind find rest. Historians still argue whether these sleepy syrups were more harmful than helpful, but the intention behind them was a benevolent one. They were a testament to the Tudors' profound desire for a deep, restful sleep, not just for themselves, but for their children as well. The Tudors also had a deep and abiding belief in the power of scent to influence the mind. They would often use pomanders, small balls of scented material, to ward off bad smells and to create a more pleasant atmosphere in their bedchambers. The pomander, often filled with dried herbs like lavender and rosemary, was not just a piece of jewellery. It was a kind of portable aromatherapy device. The gentle floral scent of lavender was a powerful sleep-inducing agent, and the Tudors would often place a sachet of dried lavender under their pillow to help them drift off to sleep. This was a form of self-care, a simple and elegant way to create a more peaceful and calming environment in a world that was often harsh and unforgiving. The remedies were not always herbal. A warm drink of spiced milk, a simple and comforting drink, was also a popular sleep aid. The warmth of the milk, combined with the gentle sedative properties of the spices, would have been a powerful soporific. The Tudors believed that the warmth of the drink would help to calm the body and to prepare it for sleep. This was a kind of folk wisdom, a belief that the physical sensation of warmth had a direct influence on the state of the mind. This was a form of self-soothing, a simple and elegant way to prepare the body for a long night of rest. The Tudor apothecary was a world of powerful and sometimes dangerous remedies. They did not have our modern understanding of chemistry, and the line between medicine and poison was often a blurry one. But the intention behind their remedies was always a benevolent one. They were a people who had a profound respect for the power of the natural world, and they used its bounty to help them find a deep, restorative rest. The herbs, the pomanders, the warm milk, these were not just random concoctions. They were a part of a larger, more complex tapestry of beliefs and rituals that shaped their nightly rest. The Tudors' sleep was a total body experience, but it was also a total mind experience, a journey that was influenced by everything from the food they ate to the herbs they consumed. The Tudors' sleep, as we've seen, was a finely tuned machine, a biological clock calibrated not by numbers on a screen, but by the grand, silent movements of the cosmos. As Thomas and Eleanor drift into their second sleep, their bodies are not just reacting to the exhaustion of the day, but to a rhythm that is as old as humanity itself. This is a crucial element of the Tudor sleep experience, their profound, unmediated connection to the natural world. In a world without electricity, the sun and the moon were not just celestial bodies, they were the masters of their daily and nightly cycles. A mainstream historical fact is the concept of a circadian rhythm, a biological process that is in tune with the 24-hour cycle of light and darkness. For the Tudors, this rhythm was not an academic concept, it was a lived reality. They would rise with the sun and go to bed with the sun, a rhythm that was in perfect harmony with their body's natural desire for rest. The lack of artificial light meant that their bodies were not confused by the false signals of a modern world. The melatonin, the hormone that regulates sleep, would begin to flow with the setting of the sun, a natural and powerful soporific that would help them to drift off to sleep. This was a form of self-regulation, a natural and effortless way to achieve a deep restorative rest. A quirky tidbit that adds a layer to this is the influence of the moon on their sleep. The Tudors, being a superstitious people, believed that the moon had a profound influence on their sleep and their dreams. A full moon, with its bright luminous light, was thought to be a time of restless, disturbed sleep. People would often complain of having hot dreams or nightmares during a full moon, a belief that was so widespread that it became a part of their folk wisdom. A new moon, on the other hand, with its profound darkness, was thought to be a time of deep, peaceful slumber. They believed that the darkness was a kind of blanket that would help them to fall into a state of total unconsciousness. Historians still argue whether this belief in the moon's influence was a form of superstition or a cultural response to the very real physiological effects of moonlight. The light of a full moon, while not as bright as an electric light, would have been enough to disturb their sleep, and their belief in its influence was a way of making sense of a world that was often inexplicable. The Tudors also had a deep and abiding connection to the seasons. The long, cold, dark nights of winter were a time for a longer period of rest. They would go to bed earlier and wake up later, a natural response to the shorter days and the colder temperatures. The summer, with its long, light-filled days, was a time for a shorter period of rest. They would go to bed later and wake up earlier, a natural response to the longer days and the warmer temperatures. This was a form of seasonal sleep, a natural and effortless way to adapt their sleep patterns to the changing rhythms of the year. This was a far cry from our modern sleep patterns, which are often the same year-round, regardless of the season. The Tudors' sleep was a total body experience, but it was also a total mind experience. Their beliefs, their fears, and their hopes were all a part of the tapestry of their nightly rest. The sleep they got was not just a biological necessity, it was a spiritual and psychological journey into a world that was both comforting and terrifying. The deep restorative rest of the first sleep was a journey into a world of pure, unmediated rest, while the dream-filled second sleep was a journey into a world of symbols and omens. The Tudors' sleep was a reflection of their world, a world that was both physical and spiritual, and a world that was in constant communication with the invisible. The absence of noise pollution was also a crucial element of their sleep. The Tudors lived in a world that was not filled with the constant hum of machines, the blare of sirens, or the roar of distant traffic. The sounds they heard at night were the sounds of nature, the hooting of an owl, the rustle of leaves, the distant baying of a dog. These sounds were not a disruption. They were a part of the rhythm of the night. Their bodies were so in tune with these natural sounds that they would often sleep through them without a second thought. This was a form of natural white noise, a constant low-level soundscape that would have helped them to fall into a deep, peaceful slumber. The Tudors' sleep was a total body experience, but it was also a total mind experience, a journey into a world that was both comforting and terrifying. The tapestry of Tudor sleep, as we've woven it so far, has been largely focused on the world of the manor house and its master. But the story of rest in the Tudor era is a far more complex and stratified one, with the experiences of those below stairs standing in stark, often brutal contrast to those of their masters. As the manor house settles into its nightly rhythm of first and second sleep, another world, a quieter and more cramped world, is also finding its rest. This is the world of the servants, the men and women whose exhaustion is the very engine of the household and whose sleep is a different kind of animal altogether. The servants' quarters, a mainstream historical fact, were not a luxurious space. They were often located in the attic or in a separate wing of the house, in a space that was not considered fit for the masters. The rooms were small, often cold, and almost always shared. The concept of a private bedchamber was a luxury that was far beyond their grasp. The scullery maid, whom we met earlier, would not have had a bed to herself. She would have shared a straw pallet with several other maids, a communal arrangement that was as much about saving space as it was about providing warmth. The warmth of multiple bodies was a natural defence against the cold, a kind of biological heater in a world without central heating. A quirky tidbit that adds a layer of sensory detail to this is the communal nature of their sleep. The servants would often sleep in a single room, their bodies a jumble of limbs and sighs in the darkness. The air, thick with the smell of unwashed bodies and the damp scent of straw, would have been a powerful, overwhelming presence. This was a far cry from the enclosed, semi-private world of the master's bedchamber. The sounds of sleep, the gentle snores, the rustle of straw, the occasional cough, would have been a constant low-level hum in the room. This was not a world of deep, silent rest, but a world of communal, shared slumber. Historians still argue whether this communal sleep was a source of comfort and security or a source of tension and conflict. The evidence, again, points both ways. On the one hand, the presence of other bodies would have been a source of profound warmth and a kind of social connection. On the other hand, the lack of privacy and the constant proximity to other people would have been a source of stress and a profound lack of personal space. The servants' sleep was not a leisurely affair. They would have been the first to rise and the last to go to bed, their waking and sleeping hours dictated by the needs of the household. Their exhaustion, a profound and total physical collapse, would have been their primary sleep aid. They would not have had the luxury of a gentle wind down or a period of quiet reflection. Their sleep was a kind of sudden, total surrender to the demands of their bodies. They would simply lie down and fall asleep, their minds so tired that they would have had no time for dreams or reflection. The deep, restorative first sleep was their only form of rest, a kind of total unconsciousness that was their only escape from the demands of their daily lives. The lack of luxury in their sleeping arrangements was also a source of physical discomfort. The straw pallets, while a source of warmth, were not a source of comfort. They would have been lumpy and uneven, and the constant movement of other bodies would have made a full night of uninterrupted sleep a rarity. The servants would have woken up with a deep physical ache, a pain that was not just a result of their daily labour, but a result of their nightly rest. This was a cruel irony, a world where the very thing that was supposed to restore them was also a source of discomfort. The servants' sleep was also a reflection of their social standing. The master's bed, with its thick feather bed and heavy curtains, was a symbol of his wealth and power. The servants' straw pallet, with its thin covering and its lack of privacy, was a symbol of their low social standing. Sleep in the Tudor era was not just a biological process, it was a social one, a reflection of a person's place in the world. The Tudors' sleep was a total body experience, but it was also a total mind experience, a journey into a world that was both comforting and terrifying. The deep, restorative rest of the first sleep was a journey into a world of pure, unmediated rest, while the dream-filled second sleep was a journey into a world of symbols and omens. From the cramped communal quarters of the servants, our journey now takes a dramatic turn, ascending the social ladder to a world of unimaginable opulence and profound isolation. This is the royal bedchamber, a space where sleep is not just a biological necessity, but a political act, a stage for power, and a sanctuary that is anything but private. The sleep of a king or queen in the Tudor era was a far cry from the honest, earth-weary slumber of a commoner, a world where the very act of closing one's eyes was fraught with danger and symbolic weight. The royal bed, a mainstream historical fact, was not just a piece of furniture. It was a symbol of power and prestige. It was a massive, imposing structure, often made of carved oak or walnut, and draped with curtains of velvet, silk, and gold embroidery. The mattress, unlike the commoner's straw sack, would have been a luxurious featherbed, a mountain of soft, yielding feathers that would have been the ultimate in comfort. The sheets would have been made of the finest linen, and the blankets of the softest wool or silk. The bed was a kind of fortress, a tangible representation of the monarch's wealth, and a physical manifestation of their desire for a safe, secure place to rest. A quirky tidbit that adds a layer of surrealism to this is the presence of bed watchers. In a world where assassination was a very real threat, the monarch's sleep was a vulnerable time. A select group of trusted courtiers would often be tasked with watching the monarch as they slept, a silent, unblinking presence in the chamber. This was not a comforting presence. It was a constant, low-level surveillance, a reminder that even in the most private of moments, the monarch was never truly alone. This was a cruel irony. A world where the very thing that was supposed to provide a sense of security was also a source of profound isolation. Historians still argue whether this practice was a genuine security measure or a symbolic display of the monarch's power. The truth, as is often the case, is probably a bit of both. The presence of the bed watchers was a genuine attempt to protect the monarch, but it was also a powerful symbol of their authority, a reminder that their sleep was a matter of national security. The royal bedchamber was not a quiet, peaceful space. It was a place of constant activity, with a steady stream of servants and courtiers attending to the monarch's needs. The monarch would have been put to bed with a great deal of ceremony, a kind of nightly ritual that was a theatrical display of their power. There would have been a small feast, a cup of spiced wine, and a long drawn-out process of undressing and preparing for bed. This was not a gentle wind-down. It was a kind of nightly performance, a reminder that the monarch's life was a constant spectacle, even in the most private of moments. The sleep of the monarch, as a result, would have been a very different kind of animal. It would have been a light, restless, and often dream-filled slumber, a kind of low-level consciousness that was always on alert. The worries of the kingdom, the constant threat of rebellion, the endless political intrigue, all of these things would have been a part of their nightly landscape. The dreams of the monarch, as we can imagine, would have been very different from the dreams of a commoner. They would have been filled with images of power, of betrayal, and of the constant struggle to maintain their authority. The lack of genuine privacy was a crucial element of the monarch's sleep. They were never truly alone, and their sleep was never truly their own. The chamber pot, which for a commoner was a symbol of a brief moment of privacy, was for a monarch a source of constant surveillance. A servant would have been tasked with emptying the chamber pot, a seemingly simple act that was also a form of intelligence gathering. The contents of the pot would have been a source of information about the monarch's health, their diet, and their overall well-being. This was a cruel and brutal form of surveillance, a reminder that the monarch's body was not their own, but a public trust. The sleep of the monarch in a world that was both physical and spiritual was a reflection of their world, a world that was both comforting and terrifying. The deep restorative rest of the commoner was a journey into a world of pure, unmediated rest, while the light, restless sleep of the monarch was a journey into a world of symbols and omens. The Tudors' sleep was a total body experience, but it was also a total mind experience, a journey that was influenced by everything from the food they ate to the herbs they consumed. Our journey through the nocturnal world of the Tudors now draws to a close, and we find ourselves in the present, looking back at a world that seems both alien and eerily familiar. The sleep of the Tudors, from the earth-weary slumber of the commoner to the restless, politically charged rest of the monarch, was a profound and multifaceted experience. It was a world where sleep was not just a biological necessity, but a social, cultural, and spiritual act, a reflection of a world that was in perfect harmony with the rhythms of the sun and the moon. The legacy of Tudor sleep, a mainstream historical fact, is a complex and enduring one. The segmented sleep pattern, which we now know was the norm for centuries, was completely erased by the advent of the Industrial Revolution and the invention of the electric light bulb. The light bulb, a seemingly innocuous piece of technology, completely severed our connection to the natural rhythm of the sun and the moon. We now have a single, uninterrupted block of sleep, a sleep pattern that would have seemed strange and unnatural to a Tudor. This shift, from a segmented sleep to a single block of sleep, has had a profound influence on our health, our culture, and our relationship with the night. A quirky tidbit that adds a layer of irony to this is the modern fascination with sleep hacking and biohacking. We now spend a great deal of money on white noise machines, blackout curtains, and weighted blankets, all in an attempt to replicate the conditions that the Tudors had naturally. We are, in a sense, trying to buy back a piece of the past, a piece of a world where sleep was not a problem to be solved, but a gift to be received. The Tudors had a profound and unmediated connection to their bodies and the natural world, a connection that we have now lost. We are trying to find our way back to that connection, but we are doing it with technology. A technology that was the very thing that severed that connection in the first place. The Tudors' segmented sleep, with its midnight hour of quiet reflection and conversation, also stands in stark contrast to our modern, sleep-deprived lives. We're often up late, staring at screens, our minds and bodies overstimulated and exhausted. We go to bed not with a sense of profound rest, but with a sense of frantic, desperate escape. The sleep we get is often restless and dream-filled, a reflection of our overstimulated, anxious lives. The Tudors, on the other hand, went to bed with a profound sense of exhaustion, a body that had earned its rest. The sleep they got was a reflection of their world, a world that was physical, demanding, and ultimately deeply satisfying. Historians still argue whether the Tudors had the best sleep in history. On the one hand, their sleep was a profound and restorative experience, a reflection of their deep connection to the natural world. On the other hand, their sleep was often interrupted by the cold, the discomfort of their beds, and the constant threat of danger. The truth, as is often the case, is probably somewhere in the middle. The Tudors had a different kind of sleep, a sleep that was perfectly adapted to their world, a world that was both comforting and terrifying. The legacy of Tudor sleep is not just about the past, it is also about the future. We are now living in a world that is beginning to rediscover the importance of sleep, a world that is beginning to question the wisdom of a single, uninterrupted block of sleep. We are beginning to see the value in a segmented sleep pattern, a sleep pattern that was the norm for our ancestors. The Tudors' sleep was not just a biological process, it was a profound and spiritual experience, a journey into a world that was both comforting and terrifying. The deep restorative rest of the first sleep was a journey into a world of pure, unmediated rest, while the dream-filled second sleep was a journey into a world of symbols and omens. The Tudors' sleep was a total body experience, but it was also a total mind experience, a journey that was influenced by everything from the food they ate to the herbs they consumed. And so, as we look back at the world of Tudor sleep, we are not just looking at a historical curiosity, we are looking at a mirror. We are looking at a world that had a deep and abiding connection to the natural world, a connection that we have now lost. We are looking at a world where sleep was not a problem to be solved, but a gift to be received. And we are looking at a world where the very act of closing one's eyes was a profound and powerful experience, a journey into a world that was both comforting and terrifying. This concludes our journey into the world of Tudor sleep. The fire is now a bed of soft, glowing embers. The house is completely silent, and the moon, a pale sliver in the sky, is a gentle night light. Your journey into sleep is about to begin. Let the quiet rhythm of the night be your guide. Let the soft hum of your fan be your white noise, and let your body, exhausted from the day's work, finally find the rest it deserves. The worries of the day are gone, the fears of the night are a distant memory, and all that is left is the gentle, comforting promise of a deep, profound slumber. The bed, with its soft feathers and its firm support, is a cradle for your tired soul. The air is still, the world is silent, and all that is left is the soft, rhythmic sound of your own breathing. Let yourself go and find your own best sleep in history.